Welcome all to this webinar, and looking forward to discussing with you on the state of our coalition talks and listening to your concerns, your questions, your wishes, actually. So my name is Sven Giegold. I'm the spokesperson of the German Greens in the European Parliament. And during the last weeks, actually, I was more in Berlin, busy to prepare for coalition talks. And today, we actually succeeded, because today, the third party of the potential coalition, Social Democrats, Greens, and Liberals, the third party, the Liberals, also voted to open coalition talks. And normally, at least in Germany, coalition talks also conclude with a positive result. So during the last 2 weeks, we were busy discussing on an exploratory paper, in German Sondierungspapier. Any native speaker may translate this more correctly. It's a 12-pager outlining the basic directions of policy. And this paper actually is interesting, and I was very pleased that I was chosen for the European team to join these talks by our board. And I will continue to be in the core group for the coalition talks, and altogether 10 of the German MEPs will be part of the coalition preparatory working groups now, which are actually in 22 teams negotiating the different thematic chapters before they will be compiled in the final phase of the negotiations. I think it's quite clear we are hoping for concluding these negotiations until the end of the year, so that before the French presidency, there will be a functioning German government. Well, my webinars, Europe Calling, I hold them quite regularly. So there are now, I always lose track of the number. I think you are now number 106, no, 105. And this webinar is about bringing people together to discuss European politics with decision makers. And normally they're in German. And they always have the same rules. So the rules are more or less what is said in public. You're very welcome to raise your points in writing and also to mark with a like the questions which you find most relevant, so that we can get the most important questions. But obviously, you can also raise your hand using the hand function. And if time allows, I will try to give you then also the floor directly. A warm thank you to my team in Düsseldorf, Max, without whom all these webinars wouldn't be possible. And and also to the EGP, the European Green Party, which has helped to spread the word. And I hope that actually my dear colleague is really here. Exactly, I see good colleagues from the Spanish Greens, Ernest Urtasun, but also Florent Marcellesi, who has been good colleagues, have been very good colleagues in the European Parliament. And look, I will give you now an overview of what we negotiated. And perhaps my team could share a link to the German text. There's no English translation yet, but I will try to give you an overview what's in it, and what I like about it and what I like less about it. So basically, to start very frankly, obviously the German Greens, we had a strong election result. At the same time, we could have done better. So we never had in a national election 14.8%. It's clearly the strongest result the German Greens ever had. For a national election. Only our result at the last European elections were better. So we received, I think, 6.8 million votes, which is quite a lot, leading to 118 MPs. Obviously, there was no easy way for a majority, because either we had to form a coalition with Christian Democrats, Christian Social Union, which is the Christian Democratic Party family, which is divided in two parts in Germany, or we had to form a government with the liberals. So always liberals and Christian Democrats needed together, the so-called Jamaica coalition, because of the party colors, or the Social Democrats, the liberals, and the Greens making a so-called traffic light coalition. Obviously, both are not love affairs. In one scenario, us Greens would have had to join Christian Democrats and liberals, which had political programs much closer to each other. In the other scenario, liberals will have to join Social Democrats and Greens, being closer to each other. Obviously, Greens had a clear preference for a traffic light coalition, simply because it is more popular. So the Chancellor candidate, Scholz, has clearly the highest support values in the German public, and the Christian Democrat Laschet, their lead candidate, was one of the main reasons for the historically weak result of the Christian Democrats. Therefore, we had a strong interest, first because politically we are more close to the socialists. Second, there was this lack of popularity by the Christian Democrats. And third, clearly the socialists were the relative winner of the elections, even if, honestly, Greens won more in percentage points than the socialists. But leaving this aside, between the two bigger ones, it was clearly Christian Democrats lost the elections, socialists won the elections. So therefore, it was quite logical going for the traffic light coalition. However, how to explain the liberals? That was the big question. However, it explained itself in a certain way, because the internal quarrels in the Christian Democrats are so bad that they didn't recommend themselves for government to anyone. So therefore, it was comparably easier than we thought to make the liberals joining a traffic light constellation. Also, we used a certain negotiation trick invented by our two leaders, Annalena and Robert, who basically made us talk first to the liberals. So the winners of the election, the Social Democrats, were a bit annoyed, but it was a bit strange for them that they couldn't invite to talks, but it was rather that we talked first to the liberals, which were the parties which were the most distant. It's a bit, we make lots of jokes, huh? So with this, because in school, the supporters of the liberals and the supporters of the Greens are those not in the same corner of the schoolyard. So different people, perhaps from their social position, less different than in comparison to other parties, but from their values, clearly different. One more idealistic, the other more materialist, also more individualist versus more collectivist, very difficult affair. So therefore, it needed trust building, and that trust building functioned. And this led then to a quite rapid decision by all the three partners to try first in this constellation. So there were no parallel talks anymore. There was only systematic talking between these three partners. And that led then to this agreement. What is the status of this agreement? The status of the agreement means, well, there are lots of anchor points for in-depth negotiations, which will now follow. And also there are choices made. And there are lots of issues which are not tackled. The issues which are not tackled in the paper, they will be tackled in the coalition talks. So German coalitions on the national level, they usually write contracts of the size of a small book. So what we do is we will now write this book. And I know in some countries this is a bit weird, but that's how it is in Germany. So, and these contracts tend to be respected. Not always, but the quota is quite good. So, and the basis for writing this book is now the text we've just decided. So the text is divided in 10 chapters. And basically the first one, and that is in a certain way also the spirit of the text as a whole, it is calling for a new start towards a modern state and digitalization. Perhaps when you had Germans on the phone, on a mobile phone, you know, it's a disaster. Always the call breaks up. German infrastructure is a mess. We have a nice current account surplus, but crap infrastructure. So, and also we have lots of problems with our digital systems. And this is basically saying we will put a lot of investment into the digital infrastructure, but also in the modernization of German administration. We will also call for using citizens' assemblies as a means of helping representative democracy. The second chapter talks about climate protection. And perhaps for some Greens a bit unusual, the headline is protecting the climate in a social ecological market economy. So this also says something about the economic order. The call of the text is very clear, bringing Germany on a pathway for 1.5 degree, respecting the Paris Agreement and respecting the decision of our Constitutional Court in Karlsruhe. Our Constitutional Court in Karlsruhe is very activist, it has strong opinions, and it had also the opinion that to protect the freedom of future generations, current generations have to act much more decisively. And this means that we have to step up climate protection very importantly. The text itself then says basically not very much, besides that all the different economic sectors will have to bring their share. It's supporting the Fit for 55 package of the European Commission, breaking with the tradition of German governments during the last years to always lobby in favor of some German industries against European proposals for protecting the environment. So that is good news. There is now support. Second, it also calls for the end of the combustion engine, which is a hot potato in German politics. And it's also saying that Germany has to phase out the combustion engine before Europe does in 2035, because we are a richer country than others. That's also good. It's also calling for a rapid expansion of renewable energy in order to achieve the phasing out of coal until 2030. So this is very ambitious, but however, the 2030, it doesn't commit fully. It says it should achieve it ideally. So there will be room for negotiation when this will be phased out, but the 2030 is there, and we are determined to achieve the 2030 also because the text supports the strengthening of emission trading in Europe. And if we do this, if we sell more of the certificates and the price is going to increase, coal will have to phase out anyway. The text is comparably cheaper, comparably weaker when it comes to biodiversity and agriculture. This is a pity. we hope that we will do better in the negotiation. When it comes then to labor, it's calling for increasing the minimum wage to 12 euro per hour. This is a big step forward because we have in Germany a very strong and growing gap between those on high incomes and low incomes. The 12 euro per hour will give 10 million Germans a pay increase. However, the text is worse when it comes to other issues of regulating the social conditions on the in the labor market. Fourth, when it comes to social security, the text is a lot weaker than what Social Democrats and also Greens, of course, wanted. It is insisting that the level of public pensions should be more or less the same as planned, with 48% of the current of the last wage level. However, it has some weird wording on the role of capital in the future in providing for pensions. This has to be resolved in negotiations. It was also a pity that a last-minute attack has killed our project of the German Greens to transform old age savings institutions like life insurance contracts and other things like this into a big public pension fund, which we call Citizens Fund. This was a last-minute attack, probably by the insurance lobby, which annoyed us a lot and is now still to be negotiated. When it comes to the social minimum, so there will be an increase for the weakest, but how well this will be received is unclear. There is clearly a renaming, so the famous Hartz IV social minimum legislation will be replaced by a Bürgergeld, so citizens' money. However, how much this means, how much this will really improve the situation of citizens is not yet defined. When it comes to the support of families, there will be a sort of basic income for children, which is called Kindergrundsicherung. One of these old, the whole thing is even called Kindergrundsicherungsmodell. So one long word, typically German, hard to digest. However, the idea is a strong one. It says all children should have an unconditional access to a social minimum, which will be transferred automatically. So then there is a long chapter on increasing German competitiveness and innovation, increasing spending for research and development, supporting startups, supporting also social entrepreneurship, and having a stronger use of competition policy. There's also we have a big problem in the area of construction, mainly in big cities, where rents are increasing like everywhere in Europe, and this shall be responded to by a huge program of constructing affordable housing, and also to create a new status of charitable construction companies. 8, and this is probably the strongest part of the whole text, it promises a whole wave of new law modernizing how Germany constructs citizenship. This means there will be easier access to German nationality. There will be special rights and stronger rights for transgender people. There will be new possibilities for refugees to get a permanent status in Germany if they have found proper work. There will also be additional efforts for integrating into German society, and stronger rights for gays and lesbians, for instance, to take responsibility for each other, and also to have the right, the same rights when it comes to having children and taking responsibility for kids. This will really be a big change in comparison to what would have been possible with the Christian Democrats. Also, we will lower the age for having the right to vote to 16. Well, and then the big downside of the text, I would say, is that with the liberals, they said very clearly from the beginning, there is two clear conditions. First, no increase of the most relevant taxes: income tax, corporation tax, value-added tax. Second, no change to the constitutional debt brake, which means that there will be in the core budget of Germany a continuing regime of very limited deficits. However, we achieved three things. First, a fight against fossil and other environmentally harmful subsidies. Second, a more active fight against tax avoidance, tax evasion, and money laundering. And third, and that is probably most important, additional possibilities for public companies or public banks to raise debt in order to finance investment. This is very important because these financing sources of investment are bitterly needed for the digital modernization and also for the green transformation. Well, and then last but not least, there's a chapter on Europe and the responsibility in the world. And this was hotly debated in the talks, and I will say a few more words on this because this certainly interests a lot of people here. So this was really a difficult chapter. And basically, we had on the key question of the Stability and Growth Pact, there were three positions, more or less. So there was one position: don't touch it, don't soften it. It should be tough as it is. There was the liberal position. There was the social democratic position saying, this regime is very flexible. It should be used in a flexible manner, and it should not be touched because it is so nicely flexible. So don't touch it. The green position was, no, this regime cannot be used. If it is to be used in the future, it needs to be reformed in order to give more space for green investment, in order to give more space for investment in general, and also because, in particular, the debt rule is bloody stupid. So it forces states with high debt levels to reduce the debt level either by unrealistic growth expectations or by an austerity regime, which then will only increase the debt level rather than lowering it. So, and therefore we demanded to be more open towards the proposed changes. However, the latest communication now coming this week from the Commission doesn't look as if the Commission is still trying to seriously reform the Stability and Growth Pact. But now we have a text as a compromise, which was a difficult one, which I will translate literally into English of a non-native speaker. The Stability and Growth Pact has proven its flexibility. On this basis, we want to secure growth, the capacity to carry debt, and contribute to sustainable and climate-friendly investment. So this is a non-sentence, I would say. It is not saying very much. It's only showing we can't agree on anything consistent, so therefore we write something inconsistent. The biggest second issue was, of course, that we thought, as the Social Democrats, that after the Corona package, with the respective recovery plans, there should be a new wave of common digital infrastructure and sustainable infrastructure in Europe. Because what happened actually was the ambitions of the parliament to have more shared common infrastructure investment in the European budget were reduced quite radically, because at the same time the recovery plans were added to the budget, so that the budget was much higher than anyone wanted as a measure to save the Eurozone and the European Union in the times of Corona. But the measures financed with the recovery plans are not pan-European. They are national measures, and this lack of common efforts to invest in European common goods, they are basically still underfinanced and were reduced. And we as Greens, and we achieved it, we wanted a German initiative to heal this. So, and I read it for you now because this is quite central for us. A European digital infrastructure, a common railway network, an energy infrastructure for renewable power and hydrogen, as well as research and development on world-class level, are the prerequisites for the European capacity to act and competitiveness in the 21st century. For this, we, the next government, will take an initiative. So it means a European initiative to our partners in order to make that work. It leaves open how we will finance it, how we will design it, because first, if we are honest, we were not in full agreement with each other. And second, there is also the openness to the partners to design it in a good way. The last sentence, by the way, of the text is a mild criticism of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which the Social Democrats are in love with, while Liberals and Greens don't like. Well, that's where we are. I would say the text has still a lot of open issues, so a lot of classic environmental issues, like for instance, resources, biodiversity, water, soil, and air quality are not tackled in the text. Also, there's very little on the state of democracy in Germany and the way how to deal with things like lobbying or the quality of our institutions. So therefore, there are lots of open issues. They have to be tackled now in the coalition talks, and we are looking forward to them. They will start this Thursday, and I must say I'm in general very pleased with this text. First, the Christian Democrats will go to opposition after 16 years, and if you ask me, they deserve it. Second, there are lots of reforms which go in the right direction. There are things which we don't like as Greens. In particular, there are areas where we don't get the progress which we believe we should get. So, for instance, limiting more strongly social inequality. But there are lots of commitments which we do like and which break with many of the problems Germany has. And we are now about to make that government work. Obviously, a government can only work if it works for all three partners. We know this, but we also know for our responsibility for planet, people, and our common shared European project. So now I'm looking forward to your feedback and to your questions. And as I said, please don't hesitate to put them in F&A, and do like with your thumbs up the remarks and questions you like most. And if you represent an organization, please do not shy away from saying where you come from. Okay, that's it. And I'm now looking at your first questions. And I see here Martin, probably Harrison, whom I know, of course. Where are the measures to deal with a climate emergency? An emergency requires emergency measures. No? Well, the text says very clearly, there will be a climate emergency program. This is ein Klima-Sofort-Programm. So this will come, but of course, the program is not yet in this short text, which is far from complete. Then there is someone who is very tricky by asking 3 questions in a row. Niels Haxthausen, funding. How can you operate within the narrow frame dictated by the FDP and the Schuldenbremse? Oh, no. What's this? And the Schuldenbremse, are you relying on green investment funds controlled by the state, but outside the state balance? Well, this is, I would say, this is at least one option, although it's not only investment funds. So, for instance, the Deutsche Bahn is a public company. There are other public companies which can take over important investment roles. There's also a large development bank, the KfW, and they can also take over that function. Then I also, perhaps, before I read more questions, Ernest, do you want to come in? I'm very pleased that my colleague with whom I drafted lots of common text, mainly on economic governance, and he comes from Spain, and I'm very proud that in the Greens we find common ground. Perhaps you want to share your impressions with us. Ernest, are you ready? Big test.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. I don't know if you can see me. No, you cannot see me.
We can't see you and we hear you only a little bit.
Okay.
Sounds like German infrastructure.
You hear me better now?
Sounds like German infrastructure, not Barcelona.
It's Strasbourg infrastructure.
Yeah, that is worse, probably.
No, I just maybe if you can develop a bit how you think this this whole issue of the rules and the economic policy mix at your level will develop. So I understand that there's a very thin agreement with the liberals because you have contradicting visions, and that is clear. And there were some people writing this morning, well, the coalition will adhere to the rules of the ESGP. Well, I don't read it that way, in the sense of, well, you can tell me better, but I read the sentence like giving possibilities of maneuver inside the framework on how to deal with the economic policy mix in the coming years. Because at the end of the day, what is going to be most important for countries like Spain, like Italy, that are indebted, is that they don't withdraw stimulus too early, and that they can actually go back to a prosperity path. And for that, we don't have to repeat the mistakes of the past. And of course, I think that the sentence, I don't know how you're going to develop that in the more in-depth negotiation talks, but I think there's an opening towards a different policy. So I would like to know a bit more your views on how do you think this will evolve in the next week.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I would say the text or on the Stability and Growth Pact is ambiguous, and this means that of course the debate will continue, but I guess also the final text will in a certain way be ambiguous. However, what will happen is that German fiscal policy, and in particular also the stronger investment push in the private sector, will lead to a more expansionary economic policy path of Germany, which will probably lead to more imports relative to exports. It is, of course, still an export orientation strategy because it wants to develop new competitiveness. However, it will also increase internal demand and therefore help rebalancing the current account, which will give more space to the economic development of partner countries. And when it comes to the Stability and Growth Pact, I think it is simply an expression of the fact that partners don't agree. And then, of course, it depends how this debate will continue. And my feeling is that for all partners, flexibility is bigger if you don't have to admit it, which is a bit funny, but that's how it is. Well, I would like to read the next question, and Enes, come back in if you like. By Reinhard Kaiser. I will then give preference to people who have non-German sounding names. There are lots of German sounding names. Reinhard Kaiser or something like that. Two stupid Zoom. Two questions. How about the negative results of the speed limit? Very sad for me. The only real point of defeat. Second, how about the Liberals' core topic of Solidaritätsabgabe? I didn't find anything about this. Yeah. Look, so first the speed limit. True, we had to accept wording that there will not be a speed limit, a generalized speed limit on German motorway. Yeah, so Germany will continue to remain, beside North Korea, the only country without speed limit. There may be some other obscure countries, but not many. So if you want to be crazy and die, you can still come to Germany. It was a really important point for the Liberals that there will be no speed limit. So there will not be a general speed limit, and we hate it. However, on the other side, we will have a clear, faster than planned phase out of the combustion engine. And if I have to choose, I know who got the bigger price. However, I agree, it's 2 million tons of CO2 simply by a speed limit without any other changes. Of course, in a climate crisis, we have to do that. Yeah, but compromises are painful. Second, the Solidaritätsabgabe. So the solidarity levy is an add-on to for the highest income brackets in the income tax in Germany, which was supposed to finance the reunification. And the Liberals demanded that this is now to be deleted and abolished. However, they did not win this debate in the coalition talks. So there was a certain logic to say, if you insist we will not increase taxes, you cannot get to lower them. However, they have still an ongoing court case in Karlsruhe. and there is a certain chance that they win it. It's not likely, but they could win it, and then the solidarity levy will go anyway. So that's about this. And now I see a respected journalist from our key partner country, Sabine Arnaud. Madame Arnaud, bonjour, bonsoir. Votre micro? Ah oui.
Bonsoir, je peux parler?
Oui, probablement il serait mieux de parler anglais.
Yes, you hear me?
Yeah.
I had just a technical question. Hello, thank you for taking the question. I wanted to know how many people negotiate, how many commissions, so to know what the what the weight of every party and the role, the effective role. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you will find it probably a bit crazy. It's 22 working groups.
Wow.
Each working group will have from the Greens 4 to 6 members, mostly 4, but some important ones 6, and the other parties will match this. So you can reckon it will be all together about 300 people involved. And then there is a core team, which will then put all the results from the working groups together and form the final text. And of course, the chairs of the respective parties, so in our case, Annalena Baerbock and Robert Habeck, for the Liberals, Christian Lindner, and for the Social Democrats, Olaf Scholz, they will be in a key position. And then there are the 3 secretary generals of the party. So they will be then the final group to put it all together. Probably looks like a heavy process, and I guess it does not only look like this, it is a heavy process.
Thank you so much for this very clear explanation. How long do you think it will last, please?
Well, as I said, we hope to be ready before Christmas so that our French partners can have their presidency with a functioning German government. But of course, substance comes first and rules over speed.
Merci beaucoup.
De rien. So let's see who in the written questions. Ask more written questions and like them if you like them. So this sounds not very German. Maya Saya. When it comes to foreign policy, will the future coalition partners have a common approach on Erdogan's Turkey? Is there any possibility for Turkey to join EU even with Erdogan? Well, Turkey, I think, is not mentioned in the foreign policy chapter, but there's no one serious in German politics who believes that there could be a membership of Turkey in any foreseeable future. So Social Democrats and Greens traditionally were always open for Turkey to join. Historically, also the Liberals, because of course it would increase the common market. However, the Copenhagen criteria are very clear, and today's Turkey is much further away from Europe than it was the case before. So no, that is not needed to write down because it goes without saying. Yeah, then there's a question, what about the Energiegeld? Yeah, that's a good point. Johan, the idea in the German Green Program was that the income from CO2 pricing in the field of traffic and housing would go to a special pot, and this money is then divided by capita and transferred back as a certain energy basic income. This idea has a technical problem. The problem is there is no payment from the federal state to the individual citizens. So we don't have such a central payment scheme. This has to be constructed. So therefore, the decision was that first, the money raised by additional CO2 taxation will first be used in order to lower the consumer charge for the development of renewable energy. So, and then there will be a debate during the coalition talks, what about a more systematic approach to paying such an energy basic income? Yeah. Then there is a question by Elias Papatheodorou, excuse me, my bad Greek. Any additional information on refugee immigration policy changes? Yeah, and that's a question from the Eco Greens of Greece. Yeah, look, there is wording that Germany will try its best to end the dying in the Mediterranean, so that there will be additional activity with this objective. So this is good, but one has to say clearly, we have different views in the coalition. So traditionally, the liberals were very skeptical that people who got on boats would have any advantage to get into the EU. So that's on the other side. This Greens would say, yeah, there is a lack of justice in this. However, there is no ordinary way to reach the borders of the European Union, and therefore people have very little choice. And they are still having the rights, enjoy the rights under international refugee law. And therefore, in any case, it is totally unacceptable to let them die on our common shared sea. So therefore, yes, there is this wording, and I hope that this will lead then to a new initiative against the ongoing of the dying. So now I see here Tom Nuttall, sorry, my Nuttall probably, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi. Thanks for doing this, Sven. I just had sort of a general and a specific question. The general one is, looking at the paper from the outside, it didn't seem to me that there were a lot of surprises. No party had to cross any of the red lines that it had laid out in advance. For you, from the inside, did you experience any surprises either in the content of what was agreed or in the process that you went through together? And the specific question, I mean, you sort of partly covered it, but it's on how to do investment in the context of keeping the debt brake untouched. I wonder if you could talk in a little bit more detail about the possibilities of establishing off-budget vehicles to do that, and also how you see the connection between that issue and then the European discussion on enabling investment without fundamentally rewriting the Stability and Growth Pact.
Yeah, Tom, to be transparent, you are a journalist with The Economist, a respected journalist, I would like to add. That's correct still, right? And thanks for your questions. And it's, yeah, look, I would say, are there surprises and are there lines crossed? Well, I would say there are quite a lot of lines crossed and surprises. So not in the sense, and that's not the style of German politics. Normally, people don't go in election campaigning and say, if this is not happening, we will never join a government. So this redlining is regarded as bad style in politics. The liberals did it to a certain degree, but in general, we are really careful with this. So I think the socialists, I think it was quite clear, if you wanted to end up in bed with them, you had to increase the minimum wage. This was bloody clear. And there was a promise not to lower the pensions. But these were basically bold promises. It was not, if this is not going to happen, we will not do our job to run the country. So this is very un-German in a way. So therefore, you are right. No, nobody had to cross such lines. However, there are lots of things in this program which the different parties didn't have in their own program, and were hard to swallow. And there was a long debate how to write this paper. So should it be a paper which only makes general blah blah, or and then compromises which can be interpreted in different ways, or do we want to take positions on certain issues where sometimes one party wins, sometimes another one? And we clearly took the second approach. So it's quite clear the liberals don't very much like the climate policies, and they do not like all of the labor-related policies. However, socialists and Greens don't like the tax and also many of the social policies. On Europe, it's perhaps more of a compromise of a normal, in the normal sense, because the general lines of the values are shared. So no one is against European integration. Everybody supports the European project. However, even if the liberals had some mild tendencies of Euroscepticism, in the end, they are pro-European. Yeah, then your second question with this debt break, well, I would say there is no circumvention, because it's very clearly defined in the ESA 2010 regulation what is the state and what is not the state. And therefore, it's also very clearly defined what is in the framework of the Stability and Growth Pact and what is not. And also the German debt break uses very similar definitions. And therefore, we didn't have to break with anything. It is simply normal stuff. So if the Italian Development Bank raises additional debt, they were always able to do so. If the Spanish public railway raises additional debt, it's their liberty to do so. And this is even guaranteed in the European treaties by the neutrality of different forms of ownership. Article 356 or 52 or something like that. So it's therefore, I would say it's all normal. It's not a big conspiracy, as now some right-wing writers say, but very clearly this was not the approach we have preferred. That's also true. We think there are lots of very rich people in Germany who gained a lot of wealth and share of the total cake of income every year, and they should pay more. But that was not what was possible in the context of this coalition. So let me look whether I find more. Yeah, this, yeah. Andras Lukacs, he asks, did you discuss how long German taxpayers will continue to finance through the EU the huge organized crime network run by the Hungarian government, causing enormous damage to the Hungarian people? Then there's a source for this claim, and undermining the EU. If you did discuss it, could you please inform us about the results of the discussion? Yes. So Andras, I understand your point, and you know the position of the German Greens is that we are very straight edge on this issue. And the key sentence on European policy in this text says the following: we are determined to make the EU more capable to act and more democratic, and we stand for an EU which protects its values and its rule of law to the inside as well as to the outside. And this means, of course, that I guess you can expect from a new German government a clearer position on issues of the rule of law, corruption, and the like in third countries. And this will certainly be debated now in the coalition talks. And I have to say that even if the situation is worse than Hungary, we have other problems in other EU member states as well, which are also systemic corruption and the misuse of money and problems with the rule of law, which are too profound to ignore. Yeah, in a similar vein, Simon Gergely, is there anything in the Europe chapter that tackles the rule of law mechanism or the general rule of law issue in the EU? Only this, but I'm sure this will be developed then in the negotiations. And be clear that something is not developed doesn't mean that it will not be in the final text. So that is very clear. Monica from Italy, Monica Frassoni. On Europe, are there chances for a clearer stand on EU reform? And could you clarify your statement on the Commission giving up the idea to reform it? What? Could you clarify your statement on the Commission giving up the idea to reform it? Sorry, previous text not clear. Could you clarify your statement on the Commission with a big capital C having given up on the idea to reform the Stability Pact? Well, yeah, okay, now I understand it. So, well, the communication, which is set to be published this week, looks really weak. So if I compare this with the last communication, which reflected upon the functioning of the Stability Pact, the Stability and Growth Pact, this communication was much more promising. And this one now looks really weak, as if Commission shying away from a really realistic reflection on the functioning of the pact and the need to reform it. So I was pretty disappointed by the leaked draft communication, but happy to be surprised now this week. And then yeah, well, I think that there was in the room a stronger consensus for making courageous proposals to develop European reform than it's now in the text. So I expect more clarity coming out of the coalition talks, because there was more consensus, and traditionally the Christian Democrats were more conservative when it comes to EU reform than the rest of the parties supporting European integration. Sariana Monkey, I have a question on EU debt rules. Practically all countries now exceed the 3% and 60% rules of the Stability and Growth Pact. Where do you think this government is leaning in terms of renewing the rules? Go back to the old system, adopt new rules, make debt target country specific, or something else? Well, cynicists would say, inventing even more flexibility clauses is the something else. And if you can't agree, you invent new flexibility clauses. This is a bit what I fear. I think in the end, that's bad for Europe, because we need common economic governance, but if we can't agree on it, we call this flexibility. So I'm a bit cynic after these negotiations. However, German Greens are very clear. we will not allow a new wave of austerity. So this is clearly not what we want and what we can can make our neighbors suffer from. Charles Burko, question: Is it the old or the new government that prepares the German rural development agriculture program for the next period of the CAP, thinking specifically about consequences for eutrophication of Baltic Sea fish, fossil fertilizers, and so on? Yeah, very good point. Look, there is a compromise of the old government with the agricultural ministries in the German Länder, which co-decide on the rules for the common agricultural policy implementation in Germany. And these rules, they are, well, they bring very little green change. However, there is in the CAP the possibility, if you have a new government, you can also bring new rules. So no government is fixed, is forced to follow the same rules for 7 years. And this means, of course, that for Greens, it is important to negotiate changes to the implementation of the CAP, because the common agricultural policy allows now for more differences between the EU member states in the implementation. And I think Greens should fight for these changes everywhere to be used in the right way. Then here's a favorite question by Rostislav Rossipal. Will the coalition demand gas power plants to be included in the EU taxonomy? Well, we didn't discuss the EU taxonomy, that's clear, but we discussed whether there will be new gas power plants. And at least in Germany, we will need new gas power plants and gas infrastructure, because when we move to a more renewable system, at least for a quite long time, we will need gas-powered systems for industry, but also power production, and then more and more fueled by green H2, by green hydrogen. And this means there needs to be additional infrastructure, which even if the gas consumption goes down, will have to have higher capacity than before, because obviously wind and solar are more fluctuating sources of energy. Therefore, there will be new investments. And I think that under narrow circumstances, they could also be included in the taxonomy, but it all depends how they are designed. And very clearly, I can't imagine the next German government of being accommodative for nuclear in the taxonomy. So I have to come to an end soon because I have to travel back to Berlin. Max is saying Björn Neumann is a good friend of his. So my staff in Düsseldorf. So obviously, Björn, even if your name doesn't sound very English, greetings to Cambridge. Björn?
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. It was a fascinating talk. That was very exciting information. Yeah, I'm very happy about the outcome of the elections. And
but you got a bit English in Cambridge, right? So rather than criticizing me into the dust, you are praising it with total exaggerations.
Yeah, guilty as charged.
That was only a primitive German joke. Anyway, please, Björn. Björn? Your microphone is fluctuating like renewable power sometimes. Björn?
I think this is a little bit maybe the problem of England and its austerity measures.
Okay.
The connection is not so stable.
Probably a Brexit consequence. Please.
Oh, there was no additional question. Sorry.
Ah, you didn't have a question.
No, I think like Maxi just like maybe put this forward, but I didn't have an additional question.
Ah, okay. Okay,
Thank
that's fine. Okay, so greetings to an old friend of Max. Good choice, by the way. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, so Monica has another one. Monica Frassoni from Italy. And Fit for 55. So the famous EU program for implementing the Green Deal. Is the support for ETS2 confirmed? Is it a questionable measure, notably in buildings? And I understand that Greens were skeptical. This is the text and some comments in French. Okay, I don't have time now to look at the French text, but the point is, in a certain way, the text confirms the whole Fit for 55 package and indirectly, therefore, ETS2. However, this has not been discussed in detail. And the big problem is, of course, the use of the money. Because if there's a second ETS for housing and transport, the money, I think, has to go back to the citizens. Otherwise, it would be a socially unjust burden on the poorer ends of society. This means that we should clearly continue to be skeptical of a second ETS. And if we agree with it, all the revenue has to go back to the member states so that it can be redistributed to the citizens. Otherwise, I think it is socially unacceptable. But this has not been discussed in this depth. So then, Carolina Stelmo-Keite, will the German Greens insist that their position on Nord Stream 2 is better reflected in the new government's policy than in the one sentence? Yeah, good point. Well, look, this one sentence clearly reflects that there are different positions. But what is now happening is basically the stupid pipeline is more or less ready now. Although it's not needed and it's mainly an assault on existing pipelines and the countries through which they are going. Now, according to EU energy law, there has to be a test whether Gazprom is a suitable operator. And we believe that this is against EU energy law. If the German government and its regulator agrees with Gazprom as a suitable operator, then this can be challenged on the European level. And basically our sentence says and encourages the German regulator to apply a rigorous test. If this test will still be positive, so that Gazprom is a suitable operator according to EU energy law, then it can be challenged on the European level, and it can even go to the court on the European level. And I would encourage everyone to do what's possible. So, and then of my old colleague, Laurie Wallach, working on trade issues since ages, is there anything on removing the German blockade of the WTO waiver of intellectual property barriers for COVID-19 vaccines, treatments and tests? EU has blocked at CDU insistence, while rest of world weeks a temporary emergency waiver. Yeah. Look, it's a real shame, and I agree, of course, with your criticism. this will certainly be discussed in the talks. There was no debate about the WTO in general. There's only one very general statement on support for free trade and on binding social and environmental standards in trade. So this is basically a compromise statement which will then lead to in-depth talks. This will certainly be discussed, outcome unknown, but it's quite clear it was not only the CDU, also the German liberals didn't like this WTO waiver. So therefore we will have to see what comes out of it. So, and I would like to conclude by reading the question of my old friend David Hillman of Stamp Out Poverty. Hi Sven, you mentioned as one of the conditions from the liberals was no increase in taxes, income, corporation tax, etc. How about the financial transaction tax, which the Greens have been very supportive of in the past? Are the Greens pressing for inclusion of the FTT in the coalition agreement? Well, clearly we have it in our negotiation list and it's part of our program. However, one has to say that there is no financial transaction tax in REACH. It's only a stamp duty, which is basically limiting itself to stock and shares, and therefore a real FTT, which would also tax derivatives, is not at REACH. However, there's a big problem because the FTT on the European level is part of the own resources decision of the European Union, and without the FTT, there may well be budget austerity measures in a few years in order to repay the recovery package. And therefore, the FTT is to come. I understood that liberals don't like it. Greens and socialists like it, even if in particular Greens would like to have it on a much broader basis. This will certainly be discussed, and it's not included in this general statement on tax increases. So there's no fixed position yet. Yeah, my dear, I wish you well. I thank you for your attention, and see you soon again in this theater of Europe calling. And sorry that I couldn't answer all questions. And but however, I tried to give preference to our international visitors, and those questions received most points. So wish you well. Bye bye. Enjoy your evening, and good night.